United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. Wonderful to see you tonight. To start off our meeting, I would first like to state my compliments for our newsletter, the Homeschool Connection. Dr. Gallagher, your team did an amazing job. I love that our strategic plan that our community members all worked on, including our staff and our parents. So if you guys, anybody can send it now, please check it out. It's very informative. I would also just like to mention that I have to watch it live stream, but our high school hip hop team performed beautifully at the Barclay Center. It was amazing to watch. Wow, right? So I'm sitting there watching and I'm like, I can't believe that they're moving so beautifully and all together in unison. They make it look so easy, but you know how much effort and time it actually put into that dance. Kudos to all the children and the staff who did it. And I just want to also mention too, we always say that, we're very lucky to be in Long Beach. And the past few months, I realize even more and more how lucky we are to have such a wonderful community. We have such dedicated staff members who come and they're about in the community, showing their faces to our students. We have parents who go above and beyond to help not just their children, but other children. So I just really want to give a big shout out to our community. I'm very proud of the support that we all give each other.
Just a quick comment. I participated as a parent in this regional Odyssey to Mind program this weekend. My daughter was in it. It was excellent. So I just want to give a shout out to them. Everyone who participated. We all got first place in the region, so we're all going out to states, so all teams. So to shout out to everyone who was involved, the students and the parents, and it really was an awesome opportunity. So looking forward to states.
Thank you, Mr. Pinto. Okay, now I give it over to the report of the superintendent of schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Conway. As is our tradition, we're starting our meeting with a student showcase. This time on our Spirit program. So, Dr. Ostrom, you're to take it.
So I'm going to invite our wonderful library media specialist up to welcome and kind of start off and launch our presentation tonight.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about and showcase the Elementary Spirit program. I'm Lori Hartfield, Library Media Specialist at East End Liddell Schools. SPIRIT stands for Specialized Program Integrating Research, International Mindedness, and Technology. And while we've had the program in place for over 10 years, we've had the opportunity to incorporate some new and enhanced components this year, such as the district-created Profile of the Graduate Trades and the recently completed Computer Science and Digital Fluency Learning Standards. Profile of the Graduate Trades are infused throughout Spirit and can be thought of as the core of Spirit. Team Challenges, the favorite of many students. Research skills, including lessons on information source reliability, avoiding plagiarism, paraphrasing and citing sources. The virtual field trips to other countries and the e-portfolios all provide students with a conscious awareness of themselves and the graduate trade skills they will need to be successful. As for the technology part of Spirit, we have the New York State standards to guide and focus digital literacy. Students understand that coding requires logical thinking with or without a computer. Spirit's Adventures in Coding unit has students gaining foundational coding skills through unplugged experiences as well as in-depth coding processes online that both allow for plenty of creativity. New this year are the Google ePortfolios, a place where students can post reflections on their work in Spirit, as well as their interests and pursuits both inside and outside of school. This ePortfolio will carry forward through their time in Long Beach schools and allows them to take a look back by reading posts and viewing pictures of work they are proud of, their thoughts, strengths, goals, and achievements at each grade. Students are beginning to be prepared for a future with unknown job titles, but they will have the intellectual, technical, and social skill sets we already know work in a rapidly changing world. Let's hear it from the students themselves. Here's our spirit video.
In spirit, I like the team challenges best because I get to be with my friends, communicate better, and learn from my mistakes. Spirit is one of my favorites, especially because we do a lot of team challenges and we have to communicate with each other. My favorite activity in spirit is a team challenge. The reason I like the team challenge is because it helps people work with each other and it also helps you engineer buildings with limited supplies. My favorite activity in spirit is team challenges. I like team challenges because they help me work on the graduate traits, which one of my favorites is perseverance and resilience. It got me to get better independence. Before I always needed a friend to do something. Now I can do anything anything that I want to. It doesn't have to be like even myself. So I always love that about spirit. I love the spirit class, and I'm telling you why it's important to do a citation. It's important to do a citation because if you don't do a citation, people might think that it's your own work, and that's not, like, if it's not your own work, that's not fair to the person's work who it is. So you gotta make sure that people know that it's not actually your work, it might be somebody else's. My favorite spirit activity is the portfolio reflections. I like these because I can look back at however many years I want and see the goals that I achieved and set. My favorite activity in spirit is my portfolio because whenever I get older, when I'm in middle school or high school, and then when I'm an adult, I can look back on it and decide is like what I liked in 5th grade or like in middle school and stuff. So that's why I like the portfolio so much. My favorite activity in spirit is the International Mindfulness Virtual School Tour because in Japan, and it's really cool over there to see over there how school is, and it's really different from here. My name is Michaela, and my favorite part of Spirit is coding. I really like coding because we get to use all these really cool different tools, and in coding, we get to actually use art. And over here, I get to do repeat blocks and either do a 360 or turn right, and they get to use really cool circles and shapes.
Aside the profile of graduate trait that relates most to coding is definitely critical thinking and data science, because you have to use your critical thinking in a sense that computers cannot understand fuzzy knowledge. You have to be so specific and overthink everything, honestly, to make the code work. Another thing I like about coding is the ability to pretty much make anything you want happen with the press of a button.
My favorite part of spirit is coding because I like the challenge and it's a trial and error. If you don't get it right, you have to try again and again. And I think it's more rewarding if you get it wrong than you get it right.
So I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Spirit teachers, so Lori Hartfield, Tara Salvador, and Keelan Fuentes King, who couldn't be here today. But Dr. King said wanted to share her excitement about the program. And it's so amazing how so many of these skills, these integral skills that we value so much as a district, K through 12, are integrated into every aspect of student learning. So thank you so much for coming tonight and for putting this great experience together for our students.
That was one of my very favorite student meetings ever.
It's a good one, right?
I just wanted to make a few comments. Thank you so much for sharing your students with us, or our students with us, I should say. I took some notes just because I just recently completed a leadership development program at my job, and I work in private sector. And two things that came up in that video that stuck out to me were the team task challenges and the self-assessment. And I feel like, you know, and I feel like I keep saying this over and over again, which is a good thing, that I'm looking at the way that we're working with our students, but however where they are, elementary school, middle school, high school, and we're teaching them how to be lifelong learners, but also how to be involved in these leadership type experiences. And these are the kinds of things that are going to carry them through into their, like, I wish I learned about self-assessment. You know, my boss asked me a few years ago, you fill out a self-assessment, it's really intimidating. So these kids are doing it, you know, at a young age and assessing themselves. And the team challenge is just now in business, anywhere you go, most people are working together in teams, and I think it's so important to learn how to do that at a young age. And so it just mirrors what we want these kids to be doing throughout life. So thank you for sharing.
I would just like to say this has always been one of my favorite parts about the board meetings, when the students come and they showcase. So that's really what we're here. We're here for the students and for you. To hear their excitement and their learning, and pretty much all the students said, learn from my mistakes, love the challenges. It's really showing that you're instilling in them a love of the risk-taking that's necessary for their learning. So we really would like to thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you.
So then we'll continue with our budget presentations. Mr. Keegan.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Good evening, everybody. This evening, we're going to talk a little bit about clubs and athletics. We're also going to revisit some of the middle school and high school totals that we shared at the last presentation, because we have some updates. We're also going to talk about the total budget draft that we have so far and revenue, how we're going to pay for it. So let's get right into the middle school clubs and athletics. For the clubs, we have 2850, which is the function where you find it in the budget. You see here what we're looking to do is to add two new clubs, the Triumph Music Honor Society and Long Beach Middle School Morning Madness. Announcements at the middle school, also in athletics, which just the contractual increases for salaries. So we're looking here about an increase just several $1,000s for the clubs and the athletics. Overall, the middle school program, restated here some updates from where we were last time. Not only do we have the proposed budget that includes contractual salary increases for staff and the general education perk sub that we spoke about, that additional slot, we also have a new musical theater class at the middle school, additional E&L instructional support that is needed, as well as the stipends for the two additional clubs that we spoke about in the last slide. The proposed budget increase is offset by one fewer sixth grade class because of enrollment. Also, some reductions in the sixth grade specials that support the sixth grade class, a slight reduction in AIS reading and math, for an overall reduction in the whole middle school program of a 1.3 FTE, which is full-time equivalent, and this is again in the general education program. So these are the latest information and updates for the changes that we made over the past couple of weeks. Over at the high school, we also want to talk about clubs and athletics. Again, you'll see those same function numbers, 2850 for clubs, or co-curricular we call it, or 2855 for athletics, but different locations, right? 21 locations middle school, 22 location in the budget is the high school. And what we're proposing here, not only are the contractual salary increases for all of the club advisor stipends, but the addition of two new clubs, bagpipes and the step team. These are coming from the students, which is interesting, and that's what we really love to see. When the students generate the interest, go to administration and they say, we'd really like to have this new club because we're interested in participating and learning more and having that extracurricular activity in bagpipes and the step team. On the athletic side, 2855, you see here again the contractual increases for all of the coaches, new year, a new junior varsity girls flag football team. We've had so much interest in our girls flag football team this season that our athletic director feels that the district would benefit by having a new junior varsity girls flag football because it opens up opportunities for our girls. And what's interesting about this team, what I've heard from Mr. Epstein, is that the girls that are coming out for flag football, for the most part, are girls that are not participating in something else. Sure, there's some crossover, but again, it's a new opportunity to engage students that otherwise wouldn't be engaged. So we're talking about 13,000 increase on the clubs and about a 25,000 increase when it comes to the sports, because we're looking for a head coach and an assistant coach for that new girls JV flag football team. Restating the high school program here, you see a net reduction of a 0.7, and that's updated from where we were last time after we've gone through back and forth with the high school team, looking at increases in some departments, decreasing in others. Overall, a net reduction in the program based on some efficiencies the high school is able to achieve for next year. We talked about those 4 general ed slots, the 2 additional ones for the permanent subs, for a total of 6. And this also includes the new advisors for the clubs and the new team. And that's our new number for the high school program. What we're looking at now is a proposed budget of about 151.7. And that number is fluctuating, right? Over the past couple of weeks, as we go through different codes, realize that we need to fine tune a little bit. So over the past couple of weeks, this number has fluctuated a little bit, a couple $100,000. And I think we may be able to get it down a little bit more before we do the final adoption, as again, we go through codes every day and make sure that it reflects updated information. But what is important is that the proposed budget is lower than the current budget, right? And that's really important. Whether it's a 0.1% reduction or 0.2% reduction, where we may end up, we're going to see a couple $100,000 of a reduced budget, what we're proposing for next year, which could be tricky. And I know I talked about that at the last meeting. How are we reducing our budget, but yet we need an increase in our tax levy and we're getting more state aid? Like, how does that make sense? And I have some notes here to explain that. The main reason is that in this current year budget, right, what was adopted by the board last year, included a $4,285,000 expense for capital. Where did we get the money? We had the cash on hand. So we had a corresponding expenditure and a corresponding revenue. We're taking that $4.2 million away, and then we're left, and you'll see here in the next slide, with a gap that we have to fill in. Right? So if you take a look at our revenue projection for the current year, we had appropriated fund balance for that same amount of that capital expenditure, $4,285,400. We don't have that capital expenditure anymore because it was a one-shot. We also don't have that revenue source, right? And there we have to make up. And how do we make up for that gap? More state aid, that we're projecting about 1.2 million more in state aid. A little bit more from the life pilot. And about a $1.3 million increase in other revenue. Happily for the district, interest rates that we're seeing across the country is benefiting the cash that we have in our bank accounts, and we're able to earn more interest income than we've had in many years in the past. So we've always had an interest income line item in our other revenue category. What we're going to experience this year and next year, what we're projecting is a much higher amount than we've had in the past, and that's helping us and enabling us to really benefit in this other revenue category of an increase of about 12%. Tax levy, I have been talking about, we're probably going to need 2% levy. I had mentioned to the board, I know we've had 2 years in a row of a 0% increase. That means we've had the same tax levy for 3 years going, but we're going to need to start looking at the tax levy in order to make our new budget to meet that gap. I originally talked about a 2%, but after going over our the income that we're receiving from our bank accounts, our interest income, I'm able to, at this point, project a 1.5% increase, which in the scope of things is a very modest increase in the tax levy, especially after 2 years of a 0 to now asked the community for a 1.5% increase. It's very modest. And when you take a look at, again, those same numbers, we're looking for about a $200,000, but it probably will end up more like a $300,000 lower budget than the current year. We'll fluctuate with this appropriation from general fund. This is what we use money from our savings account that we use towards operating expenses. You never want this to be too high, but it's always a number where you can fluctuate a little bit just to fill in the gap. So more increase in state aid, a little bit more increase in the pilot, more increase in other revenue, partly from the interest that we're earning on our bank accounts, and also there's a larger class coming in from Island Park that was graduating, so we're also going to show some more tuition income, about a 1.5% increase in the tax levy, overall tax levy that we're asking for the community. Again, basically the same and appropriated from the general fund, and that's how we balance the budget, what we're projecting at this point. Some important upcoming dates. The next board meeting, Tuesday, April 18th, is when the Board of Education will adopt the budget. Then there is a budget hearing. So what happens between April 18th and May 9th is I go out, I talk to the PTAs, I talk to the civic groups, spread the word, give information about the budget, give information similar to what you heard here tonight. Then at the board meeting on the 9th, the public can come, not change the budget number that was adopted by the board, but they can weigh in, whether they like it, whether they don't like it. It's a forum for the public to come in and talk about how they feel about the adopted budget. Once the budget is adopted by the board, then on Tuesday, May 16th, the public gets to vote on the budget, right? So it's like a two-part process in the sense that the board adopts their budget. They say, okay, community, now this is the budget that we're gonna hope that, you'll have a chance to vote on. And then this is the vote and also the board election. Comments and questions from the board, please?
Dr. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Dito. Thank you for the calendar. I find that helpful. Just want to point out, as I pointed out at the last meeting, I just hope in terms of the formation of clubs, just the presence of clubs, that the administration in each respective building, middle school and high school, is mindful of enrollments in them. And I'm hoping that the clubs to have healthy enrollments in terms of nobody wants to exclude, nobody wants to exclude in terms of or prevent engagement. So I want to make sure that there's a healthy enrollment in each club, and we're not basically keeping clubs going year to year. The enrollment in them is not satisfactory. So I just ask that be, I suspect there is a procedure.
There is, Dr. Ryan.
And when I asked for class sizes, I also asked for clubs, and I saw them, and I saw that some were of concern in terms of being undersubscribed. So I hope that the high school makes effort to recruit, if there's need for recruitment in terms of respective clubs, and that we keep that in mind in terms of moving forward.
I can assure Dr. Ryan that my conversations with both the middle school and the high school administrators on this topic, they do keep a watchful eye on those numbers. And when there is a club that's low, they do consider, not running it again the following year and sometimes substituting it for a different club. But there are a couple of clubs that I know, particularly I think maybe it's at the high school level, the math team is relatively low, but the kids are so engaged and they're doing really well in the competitions. So sometimes the numbers may not be what you'd think, but you have, let's say, a very active group of students who are actually doing really well in competition.
Well, that's the case with the newspaper as well.
Exactly.
I mean, I've been asking for high school newspaper for a number of years. Presently, there are 6 kids on that. So I would ask them, hopefully, high school and the English department maybe, to sort of recruit students for respective athletics, current events, or editorials, or layout, those kinds of things, just to be ever watchful in terms of that. Because it's better for those 6 too to be engaged with a larger number. Bless you. Thanks, Mr. Dean.
Thank you.
I just have a comment and then a question, quick follow-up question. So thank you for going over the breakdown and explaining to the public sort of where that tax and levy comes from. Because I know there has been, at least on my end, some community members have come to me and asked how come we've had a zero for so many years to 3 years, and all of a sudden now we're having a tax increase. Where does that come from and how is that determined? So I just appreciate you going through it and really explaining. I know originally you said 2, hopefully now we're at 1.5. Between now and the end of, or mid-April, do you expect that maybe it will go any lower, or is this sort of where you are? Because I know you said the numbers keep moving around.
So that's a good question. And first I want to just say one more thing about the cost, right? So, we've held firm on the tax levy for the past 2 years with 2 years in a row with 0% increase. There's only so long any entity can keep that with inflation the way it is. Where, as I shared earlier in the year, our health insurance premium costs, that alone is going up $2 million, which is, a high number. Fuel costs, again, going up at a larger rate because of inflation. Some supply costs as well, but not as much as what we see in fuel, whether it's electricity or our gas or, oil and health insurance coverage. So that's what's driving the fact that, we have to manage these costs, right? And thankfully, we are getting more in state aid, more in other revenue, which mitigates how much we need to ask the community for in terms of an increase in the tax levy. In terms of where that may end up, I'd like to say it's about 1.5%. If that number, if our bottom line budget turns out to be 151.6, right? You could say, okay, well now we're $100,000 lower where we are tonight. We could lower that by whether it's a point something percent, or we can say maybe we'll lower how much we're asking the appropriated fund balance. And I'll just tell you why in terms of that, thinking about strategy, is that, we have our base in terms of what, in terms of the percentage of what we're operating on the base. And in future years, right, if we do have cost increases, it's a little bit less flexibility because we run a very lean budget. So sure, we may end up, and I could say, well, now it's a 1.4, or I could say, let's lower the appropriated fund balance by 100, and then we know what we did the past 2 years when we needed to close that gap, we increased the appropriated fund balance. So I'd like the board to think about, and I'll go wherever the board wants, where's the bigger impact, right? Going for the 1.4 versus the 1.5, or lowering this by, let's say, $100,000, and knowing that maybe next year, the year after that, if we want to bring this number up, because we want to keep our tax levy relatively stable, we have that flexibility. So in terms of my strategy, as in my area, in terms of being assistant superintendent for finance and operations, that's what I think about. Is I can certainly perhaps lower this to maybe a 1.4, but I'm also mindful of trying to manage how much we have to take from our savings to manage the budget. But $100,000 is not going to really make or break one way or the other. So it's something for the board to consider, and we can ultimately decide where we want it to be. Okay.
Ms. Rona?
Oh, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
This budget adoption comes up quick. We've been talking about it for a long time. I heard what you were saying in response to Dr. Ryan's question about enrollment and attendance in clubs and athletic teams. So I guess I'm more concerned with what's the procedure for how a club or a sports team gets started? Who initiates that? What is involved? Maybe that's not for you, maybe that's for Dr. Badger, I'm not sure.
So it generally is student-driven, Mrs. Rhoda. If the students approach, and the students know this, they can approach administration and propose that they'd like, for example, a bagpipe club, who knew? And then the administration looks at their club costumes and says, okay, we are, we're probably going to eliminate 2 clubs this year, so potentially we could add 2 clubs. We also had interest in the STEP team, which is very popular among young people today. So it usually does come from student interest. Occasionally, we've had some adults proposing clubs when students really said, oh yeah, we really want to do that. But we try to really capture this.
And same thing with the athletic teams?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for example, at flag football, we got the very games started. It turned out to be wildly popular. And so Mr. Epstein said, I have a lot of kids who play with
Okay, great. Now, what happened with our enrollment or attended, I guess enrollment is a better word, for crew? I know that we did a pilot crew program this year, but then I never heard another word about
Oh, it
it.
just started actually, it's starting now, it's spring sport, and we have 34 kids.
And how many votes in that student program?
You're the
probably
experts. Do you know how many votes?
I know the number of kids, I think that they were starting with Irving and getting kind of the basics. I'm not sure about the transition to the winter, but I'm confident Army has a plan. I'm very confident.
Team, so they're training it through, and they think the plan is to have some kind of a, local regatta that they can enter.
So is there an increase in, like, are we losing that pilot money? That, I think that was under a grant.
No, that's under New York.
Okay, so that would be funded for next year, okay. Okay, my only other question, is I very much enjoyed your explanation of appropriated fund balance versus tax levy. It does, we do get some flexibility, particularly in light of the fact that for the last few years, we've had a 0% tax levy increase. So my question is, bottom line, with all of the explanations that we've had today, was our budget, our 2023 to 23, our current budget, no, sorry, I asked you wrong. Is our current budget for proposed budget for 23-24 about minus the capital improvement, about between $4 and $5 million greater than this current year's budget?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, not excellent. But is that about the amount that goes up every year?
No. Like I said, health insurance premiums going up $2 million. We don't typically have that type of an annual increase. So that's a big chunk of it. The fuel costs, right, another big chunk. The typical step, the annual increase for salary, contractual salary increases, that's going to be pretty much the same every year with some modifications depending on what the exact percentages for staff for the proposed year. Also depending on how many retirements and how that's mitigated by, when we replace somebody, there's somewhat of a savings there, right? We call it typically breakage. So there's some savings there. The year that we're looking towards is a lower year in terms of retirement. So we've had a large group of retirees, so that varies it. But I'd say the biggest difference for the proposed year, the health insurance premium cost going up such a large number, in terms of the percentage and the dollar figure, and those fuel and other costs based on inflation.
So why, and I'm not looking at this year, I'm a firm believer in if we have the money and need to use it for the kids while we have it, we should use it. But, and again, this might not be a question for you. Why? So anybody feel free to answer. Why are we improving or enhancing our offerings in a year where so many of our fixed costs are increasing by so much?
Well, I think if you look at the relative increase, improving and enhancing our offerings doesn't necessarily cost us a whole lot more money at all. You have to remember that all of those things are also balanced out by efficiencies. We reduce staffing in both high school and middle school. We reduce staffing in special education. We're adding clubs, but we're subtracting clubs. So I don't think that, I think in years like this, we're very conservative about what we improve or enhance. And we do what we can that's super necessary for kids, being mindful of that balance.
And I'm going to echo Dr. Gallagher for just 1 second. If you take a look at the overall middle school program, we're reducing by 1.3 FTE on the general ed side. We know we already talked about the reductions on the special ed side, 2 to 3 teachers depending on middle or high school. Then you go to the high school, again, another net reduction of 0.7. So we are really achieving these efficiencies that we talked about. And maybe an enhancement, maybe in, let's say, well, we want to offer a JV varsity team because of the numbers that's coming out of enrollment or two new clubs. But when we're talking about a $150 million budget, we're highlighting what's different because of those, but the actual cost of it, percentage cost is very, very small. And the overall savings, I mean, again, as you stated accurately, the budget compared to the operating budget is going up about $4 million. But again, it's those big drivers that are driving it. It's not the fact that maybe you're offering a musical theater in the middle school as opposed to the high school or the crew program on the art grant. You know, we're highlighting those because it's something that's new, but for the most part, the proposed program for next year is very, very similar to what we're running this year.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a clarifying question regarding the clubs, just to follow up on Ms. Brown's question? So I understand that it's a grassroots effort, and I love that it comes from the students, but just so the public understands, and maybe for my own education, how does that start? So if a student has that idea, who do they bring it to? And then is there a minimum amount of kids? Do they have to have a
Yes,
petition?
so there's actually a club charter that is laid out in both the middle school and the high school, and there's a procedure that they follow. Each of the buildings has an assistant principal who manages that process, and the students are aware of how to do it, and they do have a minimum number of students that they require for the club to comply.
Awesome, okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mrs. Vito, for your presentation. And thank you also for explaining very clearly about the clubs. I still just have a quick question about them. Some of the clubs are half year or 3 months or a year. How do we establish how long the clubs are?
Well, so again, that's part of the whole process. They, in some cases, students really only want to enter the club because they're involved in different things. It depends on whatever the club is doing, whether it requires a product at the end or, you know, in the case of crew, it's primarily a spring activity. Yeah, so that's all part of that process, figuring out how frequently it'll be and the duration of the club, and that's factored into the
Are there opportunities for the students to compete in such clubs, like for bagpipes, for instance, for their competitions?
Well, I think the initial thinking is that it's a beginner club, so I'm not sure if it's a beginner bagpipe. I don't know that that would be too much fun.
Actually, they all come out on March 17th.
Yeah. Actually, it's an interesting fact, they don't even actually learn on bagpipes initially. They learn on something, I forget the name of it now, but it's like a canter, I think it's called. And it's just an air bag with valves that they have to learn to control before they move on to bagpipes. So there's a little bit of a process.
So we're always talking about getting our students to come to school. And I think it's wonderful that we actually are using student voice, because students aren't always motivated to come for their academics. They're motivated to come because the club is going to happen at the end of the day. They're motivated to get friends. So I give you a lot of credit for listening to our students and for trying to find ways to entice them to come to school and to stay in school. Going to our budget, I know that occasionally, and I want to say occasionally, Mrs. Vito, we have capital emergencies. So do we have enough money saved so that if there is an emergency, we can take care of it without any worry?
So if you take a look at this slide, you see here that we are planning to spend, I talked about the last few weeks, $5.2 million from our capital reserve. For the most part, that's the entire balance that we have in our capital reserve fund. However, we hope to end this year with some operating surplus. Right? And what I'd like to do is when we end the year with an operating surplus, whether it's $1, $2, or $3 million, is to put that money into the capital reserve fund to replenish that. And that's how we're able to, pretty much on an annual basis for the past several years, do a subset of work that we know we need to do to address the needs that are presenting themselves through our capital reserve fund. Well, all we need to do is ask the community for the approval to spend money we already have on hand. So I'm going to say to you, Mrs. Conway, that at the end of this year, whatever we have as an operating surplus, and I'm expecting somewhat of an operating surplus because part of that interest income that I was talking about that's getting projected for next year, we're enjoying the benefit of this year, which was not expected. We didn't know interest rates were going to climb as high as they did, right? To our benefit for the money that we have in our bank accounts in the form of interest income. So we'll replenish that. And if there is some sort of an emergency, again, we're not talking large scale, but if there is some sort of an emergency, we should have some of that cash in our capital reserve fund. I do not have any money built into the budget for quote an emergency. You just can't budget that way. You know, we can't budget that way. But that's what the capital reserve fund is for.
Thank you, Mr. DeVito. I don't have any more questions.
Yeah,
Yes, Dr.
I
Ryan.
just have 3 questions. First, when is the line by line going to be on the website?
It's on the website already, Dr. Ryan,
Is
first
there a
draft.
flyer across so people can see that it is?
It was originally, I don't know if that
Yeah.
ticker tape still is there, but I know for a fact the line by line is there. And this Friday, we'll put what I'll call the second draft,
Right.
line by line on.
Right.
But yeah, I know for a fact that the first line by line is on.
All right, great. Second is, every year I ask about cybersecurity and insurance in terms of, do you think we have provided enough cushion in the budget for that?
So what we do every year, Dr. Ryan, is we consult with our insurance professionals and we ask that question. Now, I believe we have our general coverage and we have some sort of supplemental coverage for cyber insurance. And what I've been told by our insurance advisors is that is sufficient coverage for a district of our size. So we do have that type of insurance.
My last is just a comment. You were kind enough to meet with me the other day to go through the line by line. And I'm just astounded by the electricity costs. You know, you had mentioned fuel. I just think communities, you know, they've got over $1 million next year. I guess we're all experiencing it at home in a much, much more limited sense. But that's a tremendous, tremendous bump in terms of that. So I just wanted the community to know that. That's just a specific example. And I'm not going to ask about electric buses either, you know, because we should address that. That too has been a concern of mine historically, moving in that direction. Now it doesn't seem to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Student organization announcements. Questions and comments from the public on tonight's agenda only. Presentations of the superintendent.
I guess the board to consider item 1, certificate of personnel.
Second, discussion.
Yes. I just wanted to ask about the after-school swimming. And, you know, I just found that per hour maximum to be somewhat excessive, given that so many kids are certified here in town as lifeguards, students, and whatever. And why is that stipend what it is?
It's a teaching stipend, Dr. Ryan, it's not just a lifeguard stipend.
So we couldn't have a lifeguard do that. If the lifeguard did it at Hollywood Health Spa, as far as student serves, have the
Well,
CPR and first aid.
If you recall, this was raised by parents, I believe at the end of last year, there was a small subset of students who actually did get the makeup second grade swim. It was the kids who were in second grade from March to June of that year. And, you know, we felt in fairness, when we do second grade swim, it's an instructor and lifeguard in the pool at all times. And we felt that we had a responsibility to offer that to those 40 students. And about 20 of them, in fact, are taking their course. You know, what we pay instructors is contractual, and that is, you know, the rate that we are required to pay.
Fair enough, thank you.
So they're actually teaching also, not just lifeguards?
Correct, that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Dr. Ryan?
I vote yes.
Ms. Pace? Yes. Ms. Verona? Yes. Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Item number 2, non-certificated personnel.
Do I have a motion? Motion. Second?
Second.
Discussion? I'm just noticing here that Ms. Dan Rosell is retiring, and she's been with us for so many years. I just really want to wish her the best in her retirement. She's been amazing. I want to thank her for all that she's done for our students. Whenever you walk into the guidance office at the high school, she always gives you a smile and she's always willing to answer any questions that you have. So we're really going to miss her. Dr. Ryan?
I vote yes.
Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Ms. Verona? Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Ask the board to consider items 3 through 5.
We have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Verona.
On number 4, I don't understand this. What is it? We're opting out of a
Yeah,
tax
so-
exception?
So this has brought this conversation basically because of the conversations around the city about the Avalon project. There is an exemption under state tax law
I
that
can't hear the superintendent.
that provides utility companies that are intending to do alternative energy efficient energy with the ability to request a pilot of payment for taxes rather than pay their share of taxes. In other areas of the island, that has resulted in districts and municipalities losing out on a considerable amount of money. However, you are allowed to opt out of that exemption. So what we're saying is, if that company puts this program in Long Beach, we are not going to accept the exemption to them make their fair share of property tax.
Got it. Okay, great, thank you. Any other discussion? Dr. Ryan?
I vote yes.
Ms. Pace? Yes. Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Item 6 and 7, no action is required, no second readings of revised policies, and I ask for, sorry.
Could I ask a question about this? What are the changes to those policies? Are they new policies? Are they
No, they're not new policies, we revised them.
like philosophically?
No,
Because of-
no,
It's more according to what the stakeholders
Yeah.
advised to. Okay.
actually, this is what I think it's the last meeting that the county actually showed the changes.
Okay. Okay.
And I asked the board to consider items 8 through 10.
Motion made.
Second? Second. Discussion? Dr. Ryan? Ms. Pace? Yes. Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Any additional new old business from the Board of Education? I just have a, you could go, okay. Mine is very quick. Mr. DeVito, I know at the last meeting we discussed the manhole issue that's occurring in middle school. Could you please give us an update?
Sure. My understanding that the Nassau County, that big truck that was used to vacuum out the pipes was supposed to, I think it's supposed to be either come today or tomorrow, I don't remember exactly, maybe tomorrow, to now vacuum out from the Harbor Drive side of the pipe and hopefully clear the pipe. And we're still in discussions with them about what the steps are after that, but it's significantly better. I've been out there and back there the past, got in a few days ago back and check out and see how things are. And I haven't seen any ponding at all since they were here a couple of weeks ago to clean out some of the pipe, some of the clog that was happening there. So we're working together with Nassau County. I don't know what the permanent solution is going to be at this point, but we're grateful that they're coming with this very heavy-duty truck and clearing out some of the debris that was in the pipes and in that catch basin that was causing the ponding.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeVito.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up on that? So, obviously, that probably built up over time. So moving forward, is there going to be any sort of obligation for them to come back and maybe maintain it now that we know that this can build up so we don't get to this point?
Well, that's part of the discussion. What we really think is needed is a rebuilt catch basin, right? We know that it's crumbling. It's hard to tell what is from the crumbling catch basin, what may be some broken pipe or collapsing pipe that's underneath the field. We don't really know that yet until we send the camera in there. But it's, years and years and years and years of accumulation, plus the impact of Superstorm Sandy, And I don't want to minimize that. We're seeing that with all of the underground pipes. We're seeing that has accelerated the aging process of those pipes in terms of what would be a typical wear and tear. And assume that that also is the fact in the field.
Ms. Fiona?
That's interesting. So say we had underground pipes in one of our buildings, damaged in Sandy, but not damaged to the point where FEMA was willing to repair them. Could we go back now and say, look, the long-term damage from Sandy is that these pipes are now ruined? Is there too much space and time that's gone by, or?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. When we actually raised this as an issue to FEMA, because we knew we were gonna have some problems. Case in point, the problems that we had at the middle school in the 100s wing. We knew that we were likely gonna have problems there because we are already having some problems. And, you know, they said that we could only go so far. Something that we could prove was actually damaged by the storm, but an accelerated wear and tear. At that point in time, they weren't going to cover us from, and we raised it at a few of the different meetings that we had with FEMA. We can certainly try again.
No, the last thing I want is to reopen the house with Sandy. So I did read in your update that we got our final payment from FEMA because of Sandy.
Not final, but final for the admin building
Okay.
and final for the high school.
And what's left?
We still have this legal complex, right?
Okay.
So Lido Elementary and the middle school, and we have because we're just finishing up with that.
Okay, so
The walkway.
let me ask you a question. The money that we're getting back from them now, is that destined to go somewhere, or is that just like a windfall for us that we all of a sudden have $400,000?
Well, it's destined in terms of accounting, right? We have to settle up in terms of, we were owing the capital fund some money, and we are going to be working with our auditors on what that final number is. And I don't want to promise anything, but when everything is final, it's possible that some of the money may be in excess of what is due to the capital fund. And at that point, then it's like an additional revenue source. But the theory of FEMA, right, is reimbursement. So we're getting reimbursed for costs that we incurred. So, but we need to work with our auditors on that, right? So again, we're getting back everything that we spent. But here's the caveat, is that in the early years, some of the expenses we spent out of operating money. You know, we needed to get something done and we spent it. So on 1 or 2 years, we didn't have the benefit of an operating surplus because we spent that money on FEMA. So in theory, when all is said and done, we may have a year where it's operating surplus, but it's really operating for maybe surplus we would have enjoyed in 2013 or 2014. So we have to go through the accounting of all of that. We're not there yet, but I am greatly gratified and relieved to know that the admin has been closed and we got every penny that we put in that building and was paid for. We got back from FEMA in New York State, plus the science labs. And if you were on the board at the time, you remember that they had agreed to upgrade the science labs in the middle school because we did this CAP program at the admin building. We got the money back from so and the high school. So it was really important news for us the past month to get those 2 project worksheets closed out.
Excellent. Okay, my only other question is, recently in our update, it's not for you, you can relax. No, it's not for Michael, he's like, what does she want to? I think it's for you, Dr. Kender. Recently in our updates, we've been hearing a lot about new CTE opportunities in our district that are either starting to be piloted or are coming in the future, potential scheduling changes at the high school. So I'm just wondering, I read this stuff and I am like super excited to hear it all because I every kid is not destined for the same future, and to offer these opportunities to our kids where they end up in multiple different avenues with certificates or licenses that help them move on in the world is just really exciting to me. So you could talk about them now, but you don't have to, because really what I'm interested in hearing about is when is our community at large, and I don't mean to denigrate any of the 10 people sitting here today, but like I want everybody in our community to know about that. So I'm sure I want to know how that's going to be publicized.
So So we have, if you remember, I think it was last year, we did a number of the student showcases on the student programs, and we did use our newsletter to publicize it as well. We are doing some of that in the budget process in addition. What I actually like to do next year, because we are having really wonderful conversations about this, tied in with our internship program and the expansions of business, is maybe put together like a special CTE offerings, you know, look what's happening at Long Beach High School, and even the middle school, we're starting an energy and sustainability program next year, and maybe put that out to the community as one kind of offering that explains it to everyone. We also talked about making videos of these programs in action to show them to our upper elementary and middle school kids, because I think a lot of the kids don't know that they're available. And, you know, no matter what pathway you're choosing in life, you know, to have some knowledge in carpentry or metalworking, or, you know, we're talking with marina owners about vessel operations and scuba diving. I mean, I wish I had that stuff when I was a kid. I think no matter what your pathway, you will see people who want to follow those pathways. And you know, so many kids tonight, they're coding, they're doing portfolios, they're experimenting. I think we're really doing some exciting things, and I agree with you. I'm going to try to find a way to get that way out of the world.
Excellent, thank you. Questions and comments from the public? Please step up to the podium and state your name and address. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carol Levinson. I live at 38 Almond Street. I have two twin beautiful boys that attend Vigo Elementary and kindergarten. And tonight I wrote down a statement and some notes, hoping that I don't get too emotional. It is of course extremely difficult to talk about this subject in light of yesterday's horrific events, but it is a subject I feel needs to be revisited. After the massacre at Uvalde just 10 months ago, and countless school shootings before that, I've had concerns regarding the safety measures that we know, some of which stem from the unknown about what security measures actually are in place, and some of which stem from the vulnerabilities I see every day when I drop my boys off at George School. At this point, I feel compelled to question it because if something ever does happen, I would never forgive myself for not doing so. I'll follow a list of observations and concerns. I don't know what can be answered here and now, what needs to take time, but this is what's on my anxious mind.
Do you want to announce those publicly? If you have concerns, you want to present them to us publicly, private?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing.
Well, because this is understanding, if I could just say to you, one of the things that we talk about all the time is that we don't necessarily advertise to the community.
I know.
Like, there's bulletproof glass in many places, but we don't necessarily tell people where it is.
And that's fine. You
Right.
saying that alone is already making me
Yeah.
feel that
And
that's
so
part of the
if
questions I have.
and the same thing with vulnerabilities, you know, these meetings are broadcast, so if you're seeing something, we
Okay.
definitely want to hear it, but it might be better to make an appointment with me or Mr. DeVito to just let, and then in that meeting, we can also give you a little bit more information about what we're doing. I will tell you though, we all have kids, and every one of us has that same nightmarish, you know,
I mean,
realization of
literally every day
things
something
happen.
happens on my mind. It's like, it's devastating for
And-
parents to deal with that.
I will tell you that we meet with outside professionals, not us, because that's not our wheelhouse, every single year regularly. Law enforcement, homeland security, security companies that do this for a living. And they make recommendations and we follow them. Now, am I telling you that we're, you know, a fortress? We're not. And there's a balance between making ourselves fortresses and making them places where students feel it's, you know, fun and a place for them to be themselves. But every time something happens, we have the same conversation. Have we done everything we can? Is there anything we should look at? And we look for experts to give us that advice. So I really do want to hear what you have to say, but I think I'm asking you not to say it publicly, just so
I
you can
think
adjust.
You can see most of it.
some of it is obvious,
Okay.
because I'm not in the school. Like the windows on the south facing classrooms being so accessible, are they bulletproof, are they not?
I would just like to echo that any discussion about potential vulnerabilities I prefer not be done with the forum.
So do you want me to email this?
Yeah, and then we'll be happy to have you come in, and if you want to talk to us about it, we're happy to do that. But we're just suggesting that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
But I just want to be clear, we're not saying don't raise the awareness if you're concerned, it's something you're concerned about as well. But we hear you, but we don't want to, in other words, shut you out or shut you down. It's just
Not at all, not at all.
that the list that you have is probably comprehensive and excellent, and it's something that you should either email to the board or maybe even just directly to Dr. Gallagher, and like she said, make a meeting with her. But I just want to thank you for being brave enough to talk about it, because I think we're all thinking about it, and most people don't, it's almost like we don't even want to talk about it because it's so awful. So thank you for being brave enough to bring it to us, but I would say, listen to what these guys are saying, because they're being honest.
Thank you for coming up.
Thank you so much for coming up. Any other comments?
Hi, Renee Otswani, 42nd Street. I just wanted to give a really big commendation to the Women's Business Brunch Group. They presented at the Chamber of Commerce meeting this month, a couple weeks ago, and they did a phenomenal job. So I have boys in 4th grade, so I'm looking at where my kids are going. And I am very proud to be part of Long Beach School District. And I see all these programs and these clubs that you're kind of being child-centered. I think it's fantastic. And I like that there's something a little bit kind of for everybody. And the mindfulness program was number 2. I personally benefit from it. I would love some sort of family training or family workshop night. The older kids might be able to say to their parents, yeah, the mindfulness teacher told us A, B, and C. Maybe they can. The little kids, might not be able to put it into words. And I think having families have that kind of knowledge to use at home and then reinforcing it and just kind of making the district a bit more kind of, calmer, psychologically healthier.
Resilient.
Yes, just to give these kids some tools that when these horrible things happen, they have the wherewithal. So thank you for that program, and if there's any kind of family training or workshop or something that we can do.
Prior to COVID, but I'll follow up on that.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Long Beach Classroom Teachers Association.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I'm very excited and proud to announce that the LBCTA will be hosting their annual spring fundraiser this week. All proceeds of which will be going to the Lymphoma and Leukemia Society. And we anxiously anticipate and look forward to hearing your final thoughts and seeing the adoption of your budget on April 18th. Thank you for everything that's gone into it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Administrative Supervisor and PPS Group,
No comments.
LBSCA, Long Beach School Employees Association, Group C. PTA. May I have a motion to go into exec?
Yes, I'd make a motion to go to executive session.
May I have a second? Second. Just so you know, we're going to go into a private session now. You do not need to stay there. The public meeting is over. So everyone has a great evening. Thank you.